If you're a high performer looking to grow and make an impact, but feeling stuck, underappreciated, and burned out at work, you're in the right place. I'm Melissa Vining, and this is the Job Search for High Performing Misfits podcast. I help high performers leave draining jobs behind, reclaim their careers, and land roles in organizations where they can thrive. Tune in for tips, insights, and inspiration for your journey to fulfilling work that fits you. Hello and welcome back to Job Search for High Performing Misfits. Today I am very happy to be talking with Dave Thompson, who is a neuroinclusive workplace strategist, author, and TEDx speaker who is internationally recognized for building neuroinclusive systems. More importantly for our conversation today, he is someone who knows exactly what it feels like to mask for a decade before finally showing up as his full authentic self and seeing his success skyrocket because of it. Between his work at Vanderbilt University and his new book, Brainstorm, Dave is leading the charge on the future of neuroinclusion in the workplace. So Dave, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. So kind. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation. We've been trying to have it for a while and all the storms have gotten in our way, but here we are now. So very happy to be talking to you. And I wanted to kind of start at the beginning. I know that you speak about how your neurodivergence was identified earlier in life, which is not the same experience that I've had. So I'm interested to hear a little bit more about that and how it was for you growing up, having this knowledge and how that affected your perception of yourself.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, late identification is such an important story right now. And it's one that I want to support, but it is not my story. And something that we're often not talking about enough is folks that grew up through this lens, right? So I had kind of the typical story of a kid that looks like me and acted like me, kind of being diagnosed as soon as I started kindergarten with ADHD and dyslexia, and really raised through a medical kind of deficit-based lens on what it was perceived that I wouldn't be able to do or I couldn't do, rather than truly kind of exploring what I was interested in and what I was great at and what my actual challenges were, besides that kind of bullet pointed list in the diagnostic statistical manual, right? And what was assumed that I couldn't do. So despite getting special ed support and things like that, and despite getting a little bit more room and test time and understanding and things like that, I really, while I feel so much for that late identification story, and I can't imagine how that feels to learn, like in your 30s or something, how your brain is wired, it was no good for me either. And listen, let me ask you, are you familiar with the Pygmalion Effect?
No.
So this is like an actual documented thing, but basically, high expectations lead to higher outcomes and lower expectations lead to lower outcomes. So it comes from, there was this study in the 60s by a psychologist, I think his name was Robert Rosenthal, and he went into a California elementary school and he told teachers that a certain handful of students had scored really high on a test that predicted like their potential or their intellectual capabilities. And those kids were actually picked completely at random and they didn't change anything else. And by the end of the school year, those students really did outperform all of their classmates, not because they were suddenly smarter, but because of how they were framed and supported and lifted up and encouraged. And so I think there's, with the kind of like protection that you get from being like considered, in a vulnerable position or having a certain identity, comes a certain projection of like, it's like protection versus projection, right? I like rhymes, but like a projection of what your potential is and what you might be able to contribute. And so it was definitely a struggle for me, long story short. And as far as exploring the world of work, I know things have changed a lot as an elder millennial. It's been a while since I was in school, but all we really did was I filled out a survey about my strengths and interests or something, and I don't remember what was on the survey, but I remember the results, and it told me that I should be a mailman. I should be like a USPS mail carrier. And let me tell you, I would be the worst mailman on the planet. I took that senior year in the middle of failing my road test like 4 times. And B, I would probably be like starting businesses from my phone in the mail truck. Like that, I have a busy brain. I need to do stuff, like, so
Yeah.
wasn't really encouraged to explore the world of work at all growing up.
Yeah, which is interesting because obviously that becomes, I think, more of a problem for neurodivergent kids going into the workforce, but is a problem for everyone because really we're not given enough support around this. We're not taught how to even find the thing that's going to make sense for us. So I see that as a big disconnect going from high school even into college. And then if you're in college, from college into the workforce.
Definitely.
And I love the Pygmalion effect that you talked about because I didn't know of like the studies and the terms, but I'm a former teacher. And that was kind of always my approach to teaching is like, I believe in every kid and I believe that every kid has, different challenges that they might be experiencing, but I'm going to expect a lot of everyone because I know that they can achieve that. And I saw my students, thrive because of that too. So I love that you brought that up. Let's go back to, what you were talking about, how they said, okay, maybe you should be a mailman. Where did that take you? Where did you actually end up going? And what did your early career experience look like?
Yeah, so college is an interesting time where you have an opportunity to like change your identity or realize your identity. And for a lot of special ed kids, that means dropping that label. I mean, a lot of those supports stop when the school bus stops coming, and those that are available are kind of more like opt in. And I did not carry that identity in any sort of like outward way with me into college. So it took me a few years to figure out how to kind of learning the hard way about how to kind of self-manage and how to figure this stuff out. Ended up thriving, focusing on sociology. And that was really just because it was the closest thing to social work that was offered at my school, because I realized I wanted to help people. It was super broad and super idealistic, but just like, I want to fix the world and help people. Got out of school and got my first job in human services, kind of boots on the ground, working in group homes in New York City with teenagers in the foster care and juvenile justice system. And the whole cliche of like, they taught me more than I taught them is like 100% true, because these were teens that had been like navigating the subway by themselves since they were like 8 years old. And I was tasked with, travel training them, and they were teaching me like how to how to navigate things. I got way better at ironing and doing laundry and things like that because I was tasked with supporting them. So it was very beneficial to me to do that. I kind of felt like a resident of the group home just as much as I felt like kind of a big brother support figure, right? And then I still didn't really outwardly carry that identity, but because so many of those individuals were neurodivergent, I was helping an individual with homework after school, and I'm really bad at math. And he was really frustrated, and I leaned in and I let him know that I had ADHD like him, and he was motivated by that. And I was pulled to the side by my supervisor and said, kind of like, as cute as that was, I would advise not to do that here. And her reasoning was that it would be used against me by my colleagues and by the residents. And so I shut up. I didn't talk about my own identity for another 10 years. Was motivated by the work, but really disappointed in like the systems level, like opportunity being provided to any of the populations that I was working with. So I ended up kind of hitting my stride, entering neurodiversity employment work before we were even really using that word. A small mission-driven social enterprise, an autistic majority employer in New York that I still very much collaborate with closely and is thriving. It's called Spectrum Design. So it is a t-shirt printing and embroidery company, promotional products, all that. And when I started, we were operating out of one small room, and I was given a lot of autonomy to like design the whole people side of what employment looked like at kind of a, I put utopian in air quotes for the listener, but like kind of a design from the ground up what it looks like to have a neuroinclusive workplace kind of environment. And we were making shirts that said happy birthday grandma for the employees' parents and things like that at first. Now they make shirts for the entire New York City subway system and parks department and tons of Fortune 100 companies and over 10 million products a year, I believe, go through those doors, and they have about 100 employees, and it's doing great. So I started exploring my brain and how it works, and realizing that I was good at a bunch of stuff. And it was only then, when I was designing like kind of for us, by us, that I realized that, I was good at it, A, because I needed a lot of the same things. So like visuals on the walls and how hiring and management and things like that work. And also because of the way my brain is actually wired, brings strong suits to that: creativity, resourcefulness, extrovertedness, so really started hitting my stride there. And I forget your question. I can go all day.
No, I love it. I want to actually go back. I mean, there's so many follow-up questions I could ask you, but when we're thinking about that moment where your boss told you, that's cute, but maybe don't talk about that. Let's talk a little bit more about how that affected you, because that is like such a disappointing thing to hear, especially because we know that when you make that personal connection with someone like the kid that you were working with, it really builds the relationship and helps both of you achieve more. What toll did it take on you when you kind of realized that maybe you shouldn't be saying these things, and how did that affect your work in that moment?
Yeah, it kind of blew my mind, right? Because while I said, not everyone, including me, like carried these identities publicly when they didn't have to, when you reach these kind of inflection points, I thought, well, if I was comfortable, it's cool. But it turns out talking about that stuff can be, sadly and unfortunately, talking about that stuff can be a threat to other people, right? And a threat to systems, right? So in my opinion, the way that kind of dusty bureaucratic system that I was a part of worked was that it was a very us and them situation, right? There was us, there was the employees tasked with supporting those people, right? And so, and you see that a lot in the first places that should be worried about, neuroinclusion: the government, education, medicine, human services. Those are some of the most stigmatizing places to talk about this stuff, because of that kind of idea of us and them, right?
Yeah.
So to speak to how it impacted me, I took it very seriously. I realized that I thought that my job would be in jeopardy if I talked about it, and I stopped talking about it. I think that started to really weigh on me over the next several years, as, like I said, I realized I was good at a bunch of stuff. I realized it was because of my brain, not in spite of it. And I just realized that I was not bringing my whole self to work, because I do like to share. There are stories that are relevant to the work that I could tell these people that would be helpful, but I'd have to say, like, not me, but a guy I know, right? That's just ridiculous. So it definitely weighed on me, and took me a while in an actual neuroinclusive environment to change my mind, and
Yeah.
to realize that I wasn't wrong. And,
Yeah.
I don't put any personal blame on that one manager. It's the system that's the problem. It's a workplace design issue, not a personal one.
Right. Yeah, because the truth is that there are going to be environments where it's not really safe. And maybe that's what this person was getting at, trying to almost protect you in a way by telling you this is not going to benefit you, when really we know that that makes us have to mask, and masking doesn't benefit us either. And it doesn't benefit the people that we're working with, because, like you said, when we approach this from a strengths-based lens, all of a sudden we have so much more potential, because we're actually working into the way our brain naturally works, and we can have a lot of success there. So how did you find that when you made that switch, that influenced your success at work?
This gets into kind of like, when you're talking about disclosure, when someone asks me, should I or shouldn't I disclose, or how do I disclose? My first question is them. It's not a challenge, but it's just why? Why do you want to disclose, right? And is it because you just want to be your whole self? Is it because people are going to notice something about you, like stimming at work or something like that, and they should, know ahead of time? Is it because you need something, right? And so it took me a while, because I didn't really need anything, but I was in a neuroinclusive environment where, that that kind of environment is to the benefit of every single person, no matter how you're wired, right? So I got to be myself. It was very functional. And this is a very unique kind of story because there aren't a lot of places that are like this, to be honest, right? So I was kind of like operating and functioning really well, but then becoming louder and prouder as like an advocate when I wasn't being a loud and proud self-advocate, and I felt like a liar. In fact, I've given 2 TEDx talks, and it was after the first one and before it came out that I realized, wow, I had 14 minutes on a stage to tell the world whatever I wanted. And I was talking about it like it wasn't me, but a bunch of people I know. And that didn't feel good. And it was then, before it even came out, that I said, I'm going to do another one. And it's hard to get an opportunity like that, but I'm going to do another one. It took me another 8 years or so. And I'm going to introduce myself in the first 15 seconds and tell people how my brain is wired. And that's what I did, which was really cool. It felt really, really good. And obviously I started talking about it in the years in between those two moments, but it felt like an exhale. It felt incredible to start doing that.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you felt like a liar. I want to go back to that point because I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to in terms of imposter syndrome and things like that. So can you talk a little bit more about that? How did that show up for you? How did that affect your work when you were feeling that?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how much of this is nature versus nurture, right? Like imposter syndrome and rejection sensitivity. I know that neurodivergent people are particularly prone to dealing with both of those challenges, and regardless of where it comes from. And I think it comes from both, to be honest. I think it comes from how we're wired and how we're conditioned. But I've definitely dealt with both those things all my life. I think that it has been something that's limited me in the past, less and less, because I have accomplished some awesome things. I have a book coming out, but no matter what I accomplish, I feel like I'm faking it. And I have to remind myself, and I remind others, that this happens to lots of historically marginalized folks, not just neurodivergent people, women, people of color, and if you don't have a little bit of it, we all can probably think of a couple people that don't have any imposter syndrome whatsoever and don't have any fear of rejection whatsoever. And what do we think of those people? What do you think of like an overconfident but wrong person, right?
Yeah.
So not only is it normal, but questioning yourself is like an evolutionary tool. Like it's a thing that we need, right? Managing it and like limiting it is another thing, but like you can't get rid of it. And so keep a little bit of that imposter syndrome in your pocket. The last thing you want to do is act like whoever you just thought of that's wrong, but loud about it, right?
Yeah.
I tend to start sentences with, well, the rational side of my brain says, versus like whatever that noise is, right? I try to separate those two things and say, what is like based on my calculations and the rational side of my mind, do I deserve to be on this stage right now or something like that? And the answer is yes. And I try to separate imposter syndrome and rejection sensitivity as like characters in my mind that, if we're talking about like Inside Out, the movie, right? These are people that like, yeah, you work here, but like you work over there, and like you have the day off today. And it's just a matter of like having a sounding board, having a mentor, having a friend, and expecting some failure. Like we're not going to get everything right all of the time because no one is. But for historically marginalized kind of left out groups, that can hit a lot harder. So we just have to be reasonable with ourselves.
Yeah. And some of what I heard you say is that some of this, when taken in small doses, can be a strength too. And I think I can relate to that because I'm always trying to improve things. So I'm always going to see that something I did wasn't the best that it could be. And some people might say, oh, but that's just kind of your limiting belief. And I've had people say that to me even last week, right? Like, no, you did great. Why are you saying that? And it's like, well, yeah, I'm not saying that it wasn't good, but there's going to be room for improvement. I'm going to take it to the next step. And that also helps us achieve more.
Yeah. And also, like, think about the folks that, well, for me, I try to think about the folks that I'm intimidated by or I'm scared of or I like respect so much, and think about, like, just as an example, how often I never would have emailed the way that they just emailed, or like, you know, they made that one typo, and like, you don't think about that and judge them in the same way you judge yourself, right? As this person of authority to you or to you or whatever is emailing from the golf course and making spelling errors, right? So just try to remember, like, I know it's a cliche, but like everyone, literally everyone makes mistakes. Nobody is perfect. Everyone has room to grow. And, you know, you wouldn't be where you are if you didn't add a ton of value.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I love this idea of the flipping this from because of, not in spite of. And this is something that I use not only when I'm talking about neurodivergence, but also things like changing careers. Like, you have a unique background that helps you see things in a different way and actually brings value to the space that you're going into. So for someone who maybe hasn't made this kind of mindset shift yet, what would you suggest in terms of how you got there yourself? Like, was there something that was helpful or something that you have to inspire people on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've kind of said this, but like, everything I bring to the table, I can connect to my neurotype. Like, you know, and again, nature versus nurture, whatever, but like, and we don't want to paint with too broad of a brush because everybody is different, but clearly I'm extroverted, right? It took me a long time to learn that tends to be an ADHD trait. The only extracurricular I ever did in school growing up was theater. I wanted to be a rock star. I'm not a rock star, and that's okay, because guess what? I get to be loud and vulnerable and honest on a microphone all the time. So it's the same exact thing. I am a visual thinker. I can see things kind of backwards and inside out and upside down. You know, I would associate that with being dyslexic. I'm creative and resourceful. I can kind of create something from nothing. I'm better at designing systems than at managing systems. Like, I know where kind of these strengths begin and end, but that's all because of my brain's wiring and not because of anything I learned in school. And at work, it was because I had room to deliver how I deliver best. I was empowered to share big ideas. I had flexibility in how I showed up and autonomy over how I got work done. And I have an aligned and approachable team where I can share 20 huge ideas and we pick one, right? And, you know, if you think about how we're expected to fit into these boxes at work, to take it away from me for a second, think about Albert Einstein. I know that there's you know, talk about whether he was neurodivergent, and I don't think it's our jobs to put these labels on people, you know, but he was definitely different, right? Picture if Albert Einstein had to have really neat hair every day and had to keep certain hours and had to clean up his desk and clean off his chalkboard at the end of every shift that he worked, wherever he worked, right? And if you Google a picture of Albert Einstein's desk, it looks a lot like my desk, but back then. Like, so there's not 3 computer monitors and fidgets all over the place. But if he lived now, today, they'd probably be very similar, honestly, right? And so he, you know, changed our ideas of time and space and, you know, all this stuff because of how he showed up and thought and worked differently from other people, right? And that's amazing for that time and that place that he was able to do that. Imagine if more people, these people that have been historically excluded and even like institutionalized, were able to deliver with, you know, the tools and the autonomy and the space to do it how they do it best. Where we'd be now there's been so much missed potential because of that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like you said earlier, a lot of this is because it's rare to find the space where it really truly is neuroinclusive and it really is allowing the people who could have a huge impact actually make that huge impact. So from that side of it, what do you find employers are doing or not, or how can someone like look for a space that would provide that kind of environment?
Okay. Well, this is a big question. We could do another hour on this, Melissa.
Yeah, we might need another episode for this one.
Feel free to cut me off or ask me a follow-up, but I'll start here. I get asked about neuroinclusive employers because I work with employers of all sizes around the globe on becoming neuroinclusive, and I get asked by job seekers, where should I work? Where can I work? And I would say that just because a company doesn't have the word neuroinclusive or neurodiversity in their recruiting materials does not mean that it doesn't work for you, right? So everyone is different. So when someone says neuroinclusive, I want to know what that means, right? For some, it means things like flexible work from home policies, which is huge for me, right? Like I do go to the office, but I probably get 3 times more done in my home office than I do at work. I like the mix, and I do travel a lot speaking and things like that. But when I can create my own work environment, the difference is night and day between that and like hot desking in like a fishbowl with glass walls and, sounds and smells and fluorescent lights all around me. Things like that. Things like, do I get a dedicated desk if it's in person? Things like how flexible time off can make or break neuroinclusion, right? And there are a lot of incredible programs in the corporate world. But to be honest, just because you hear of a certain Fortune 100 company doing neuroinclusion stuff does not mean that that whole company is neuroinclusive. And it also doesn't mean that that neuroinclusion program is open to everybody or actively running, or even if it is, will work for you. Like, and they're all very, very different. I'm excited by all of them, but they're all very different. As far as what employers can do and are doing, there's a new knowledge and understanding and expectation coming from Gen Z and from kind of the bottom up within the workforce. And so employee resource groups in the corporate world are massive. For those that don't know, they're kind of like after school clubs. They're like elective things that you could become a part of to provide and seek like mutual support, develop resources, and when companies are really doing it right, helping to shape policies and things like that. So there's a lot of those more every day around neurodiversity. And I always tell employers to encourage those and to support those and to credit people properly. That should be in people's job descriptions when they're running those, and to compensate and to give those folks budgets and to protect them, because being a part of that comes with a certain amount of vulnerability that is labor. Emotional labor is labor, and showing up as yourself and being a loud, proud self-advocate is labor and is to the benefit of the employer. And like I said, we can go all day. We could talk about management and communication and psychological safety. There's a lot of work to be done, but we're seeing it, and we're seeing it in all different kinds of ways, and I'm really motivated by that.
Yeah. And I think the kind of point you made in that last sentence is that it's not just about the employer itself, right? It's about the manager. It's about these sub teams. It's about all the different people that are working together to either make this happen or make it, on the opposite side of it, not as neuroinclusive. And kind of to go back to some of what we talked about earlier, when we're thinking about showing up at work and being able to be really authentic, and, whether that means being a loud, proud advocate or just being able to say, like, I'm showing up as my true self, for people who might be afraid of doing that because there are real risks in that. We talked about, asking yourself, why is it that I want to do this? Are there any other mindset shifts that you can give someone that might be helpful?
One is that, when you're asking yourself what to do, I'm autistic, or I'm an ADHDer and I need something, or I want to disclose, like, again, why? And the path of least resistance often works best. And this is what I'm telling employers as well. Like, just ask for stuff. If you're not comfortable putting a label on it, or maybe you don't even know your label, and there's plenty of people who don't, right? Asking for something like noise canceling headphones or a flexible schedule is not disclosure and shouldn't have to require disclosure. So I kind of have this rebranding and broadening of the idea of accommodations that I like to talk about. While accommodations are really important and they're protected by the ADA, and that work is, so foundational to disability and neurodivergence at work, a lot of that kind of framing didn't historically include cognitive stuff, things like meeting transcripts and stuff like that. And everyone has different needs at work, no matter who you are. And so I like to talk about success enablers, whether that is, some of the things I listed, like, how the lighting is in your work environment, or what kind of work environment you have, flexibility to work from home when you work, noise canceling headphones, meeting transcriptions, how you interact with your boss. Like, I know, typically you only meet with each employee every 2 weeks, but I'd like for it to be weekly for now. That should not need to be an official accommodation. That's just an ask. It can be a social contract between a manager and an employee. So I would say you can always start there, and, kind of escalate from there. But, like, if I had to tell my younger self one thing, it wouldn't be to disclose or not to disclose. I literally was not always safe to do that. It would be to ask for stuff, to self-advocate. When I say self-advocate, I don't necessarily mean talking out loud about neurodivergence. It's also just about getting your needs met to be able to perform, how you're able to perform if you have those things.
Yeah. And the term success enablers really makes a lot of sense because it shows that there's going to be value also to the employer, right? So, like, if you help me do this, I will be more successful and I will be able to make more of an impact in my job.
Yeah. Yeah. And with inclusion in mind, right? And with the effectiveness of this idea in mind, I always encourage employers themselves and entire teams to explore and embrace and share with each other what sets them up for success. Again, no need to put a label on it, right? So if your boss wants to share that they have trouble, like, rotating a PDF, or, like, the whole company switched from Outlook to Gmail and he's struggling with that, like, that's that kind of vulnerability, gets his needs met. He gets more, empathy and understanding and support. And B, even if it's not connected to a neurotype or anything like that, it allows others, gives people permission to share their own, right? And I see it when we do pilot this with teams. I see so much, like, synergy and so much motivation around this idea, and things actually change, like, quickly and immediately, and get done. If you told 10 people to do it tomorrow, imagine what people would share, what you'd learn about your colleague, and what might change for you because of that, in how you show up for other people and in how they show up for you.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I actually started doing something similar as a manager with my team. And one of my people on my team had said, sometimes it's hard for me to prioritize. Like, when you ask me to do something, I think it's always urgent, right? I'm always going to drop everything and just do that thing. And it was so important for me to hear it, because then every time I ask her to do something, I can say, you don't have to do this until the end of the week, or, like, this is not urgent, or I really do need this by the end of the day. And what I realized was that that kind of communication is helpful for everyone, which I think is always going to be the common story in these things, where it's like we can implement something and it's going to benefit not only the neurodivergent on the team, but everyone else. And to your point, neurotypicals need things too, right? So it's this idea that we're looking at neurodiversity. There's natural variation in how everyone's brain works and how everyone is approaching their work. And being able to say each person needs something different to succeed is really the key.
Absolutely. I love that.
So where do you see this going in terms of like the future of the workplace? I know you mentioned that there's a lot of changes happening, especially in terms of Gen Z coming into the picture. What do you see are the trends right now?
Wow. So it's an exciting time. um, I think that there is kind of a mandate to do better, whether they're calling that neurodiversity or neuroinclusion out loud or not. There is an absolute mandate from the people more and more. I mean, if you just look at Google Trends around what people are looking at and in an employer and in themselves, you'll see that our collective understanding and knowledge and expectations has changed dramatically. And so employers are just like how they need to keep up with AI and keep up with technology, they need to keep up with, like, if they want humans working for them, they need to keep up with that. And so again, employee resource groups are like the best thing to happen in the corporate world in a long time, because there's been a lot of challenges for reasons we don't really need to get into in the corporate world as far as doing this work at a systems level recently, right? Whether that's the economy, legislation, AI replacing jobs, things like that. And so I just like to remind folks that anyone that you share an email chain with or a Slack channel with or a parking lot or an elevator or a break room with can make or break neuroinclusion. It does need systems level support, but if, you know, if it's from the people by the people and we're figuring it out together, that's just going to happen. You know, no one's going to have a choice, right? And so I'm really motivated by that idea. And I think that, you know, things will continue to happen on the systems level. And that's been something I've been a part of for a long time. I don't want to poo-poo that at all. I mean, I'm rooting for everyone, and there is still so many companies doing incredible work. The practice remains ahead of research in this area as far as what works for people. And I think will remain that way because neurodiversity is a social construct and not something that fits so cleanly into things like collecting data. And that requires a lot of vulnerability from organizations and individuals, but things are happening. Great, wonderful things. And I'm excited.
Yeah. I love that because it also feels a little bit more empowering. Like, yes, we need the systems, but we also have some influence over this just as individual people on the teams. And anyone out there listening to this, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, can actually make a difference with this.
Definitely.
So, you have a book coming out. I think you might have alluded to it a bit earlier. Tell us more about the book and what people can expect from that.
Yeah. So the book covers a lot of what we've been talking about today. Like I said, I've had my boots on the ground as a practitioner, a strategist in this space for a really long time. And so in my kind of exploration of what next steps look like for me, I got an opportunity that I probably wouldn't have taken. If I probably wouldn't have pursued unless someone pursued me in this way. So I got asked to write a book about those experiences. And I knew it shouldn't just be about me and what I've done, obviously. I mean, it's about best practices, but I called it Brainstorm because it includes a lot of voices. I'm only one person. And so it includes, you know, academics and punk rock musicians and one billionaire and employers for companies big and small. I'm really proud of it. It has a lot of visuals, Sharpie doodles throughout the book because, again, I am a visual thinker and I like to explain things the way I see them in my head. And some people are motivated by that, so I'm excited. And most of it is written for everyone. It does talk about systems and it is written for people who sign checks and make huge decisions at companies. But most of the books out about neurodivergence and neuroinclusion at work are really written more exclusively for leaders. And again, we all have a stake in this. So we can all communicate better. We can all create better belonging. We all have some little corner within our job description where we can actually affect some change, right? And so it's really designed to be for all those people that ask me like, I think my colleague is autistic, or like, how can I be a better ally or something like that. It's really mostly for broadly everyone. So we'll
Excellent.
see how people like it. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. So where can people get the book when it comes out?
Well, it's already out for pre-order. I'm not sure when this episode will be out, but it drops globally March 3rd, 26. But it's already up everywhere where books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target, Books A Million, bookshop.org if you'd like to support your local bookshop, which is really great. And so, yeah, it's out there, and you can check out Brainstorm, neurodiversity.com for more information about the book and relevant links to all those stores.
Excellent. And that will be in the show notes for anyone looking for that. So, Dave, do you have any last words of wisdom that you want to share as we wrap up here?
No, I'm out of wisdom. I thank you for doing this, for all you do. I think that, conversations like this are really important. And based on how you framed things up for me and how it went for me, I'd say you're doing it in the exact way I needed to do it. So I just appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you. It's been so great to have you on, and maybe we'll come back again another time and talk more about all of the workplace things that I know you can dig into even more.
Thanks.
If you love this podcast, be sure to hit subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with a friend so we can help more high-performing misfits find work they love. See you next time.